Welcome to Auto Chatter. Today's episode is about the Volkswagen Type 2, or you may know it as the Transporter, Bus, Microbus, Hippie Van, Combi, Camper, Bay Window, Breadloaf, Splitty, Westfalia, or Bully. This OG minivan has a long history in the US and is certainly worth chatting about. As always, facts, opinions, and speculation will be given. Please give a like or subscribe as it means a lot. Now that we have the formalities out of the way, let's move on to the Type 2. After World War II, England's military took control of Wolfsburg and the Volkswagen factory production. The Beetle was originally designed and built prior to World War II, and when Germany switched to war production, they created the Kübelwagen that was based off the Beetle's basic design, as I discussed in the Thing video. The story goes is after the war, the factory was getting back on track building civilian Beetles, but the British wanted their forklifts back that the factory workers borrowed. So being an automotive factory, they created a flatbed vehicle built on Type 1 architecture called a Plattenwagen. It proved to be a wonderful substitute for the factory's needs that the forklifts provided. A Dutch importer saw these things when picking up a Beetle delivery, and he saw a broader need in war-torn Europe for a workhorse vehicle. He sketched a van concept in 1947, expanding on the idea of the Plattenwagen, but with the driver in the very front to allow more of whatever the vehicle needed to carry in the back, and also a vehicle meant to be driven on the street. The factory's production was full, filling Beetle orders, but the seed was planted. By the late 1940s, the concept started to become a reality. The Beetle Type 1 chassis proved to be too weak for the task, so they designed one with a ladder frame underneath for additional strength. They used reduction gears from the Kübelwagen, which is the Thing's ancestor, to allow this heavier vehicle than a Beetle, with the horsepower of a modern riding lawnmower, 25 or so, to offer adequate performance. It used the Beetle's flat-4 engine, and it was mounted in the rear too. They started rolling them off the assembly line in 1949 in two styles: a Combi with side windows and removable back seats, and a commercial, which is a delivery van basically. Transporter's unique layout made for a lot of practical space inside, given its actual size. It's less than a foot longer than a Beetle, so you can fit one in tight spaces if needed. The Type 1 style, layout, rear engine, and ground clearance means Type 2s can go places you would never drive your Dodge Caravan or Honda Odyssey. The main drawback I saw with it was there wasn't a lot of car in front of you if you were to have a frontal collision. But safety wasn't really a priority with most car makers at this point. We started getting VW buses in the US in the early 1950s. By then, horsepower was up to around 30, and hitting 60 miles an hour was probably a pipe dream. They were quite slow, but a growing number of Americans were warming up to these station wagon alternatives. They also offered panel vans and pickup versions too. A double cab pickup in 1963 ran about $2,175, which is about $21,800 today. The number of windows buses had then seems to have a large effect on collectability now, with more being better. A 23-window deluxe Samba is the holy grail today. They were originally designed for touring the Swiss Alps, allowing all the passengers to have a better view. A deluxe microbus with the Samba package in 1951 was around $2,200 new, which is about $25,000 today. First-gen buses are sometimes referred to as splitties due to the split front window design, and the front windows could pop open, which was just cool. In 1956, we started importing RV versions of buses called Westfalia campers. People who bought buses didn't care about going fast. It was a very practical platform with different models made to fit your needs. And if VW didn't make it, people would make their own modifications to suit their own needs. In 1962, about 60% of all imported car registrations in the U.S. was a VW product. So that means Beetles, buses, and maybe a few Karmann Ghias thrown in had quite the market share then. The engine sizes and power in the buses did grow a bit here and there over the years. By 1967, the bus had about 54 horsepower from a 1.5-liter flat 4. The chicken tax in the 1960s killed off the transporter trucks. What's the chicken tax? Well, France and West Germany then imposed a tax on chickens from the United States. President Johnson retaliated in 1964 by having a 25% tax on potato starch, other food products, and light trucks. It's sad because the U.S. missed out on some interesting imported trucks over the years due to this tax. The VW couldn't be imported here as a cab and chassis pickup as it wasn't designed as such. You would only pay a 4% tax on those. Toyota and Datsun trucks could take advantage of this, however. They shipped trucks here without beds to get around the chicken tax. So did Chevy with the Isuzu-built Love truck, and I'd wager Ford did the same with the Mazda-built Ford Courier. Subaru got around it with their 1970s and 80s Brat by adding rear-facing jump seats in the back, changing the classification to a passenger vehicle. More recently, Ford added back seats to its Cargo Transit Connects that were imported here, and then they removed the rear seats upon arrival to circumvent the tax. This law still exists today. Isn't politics fun? The VW bus in the 1960s and early 70s was part of a counterculture revolution to some, rejecting large cars from Detroit, the war in Vietnam, and consumerism in general. The hippie movement gravitated to these quirky vans, and many used them to drive to protests and music concerts. They were often decorated accordingly to make it known to all you were part of the revolution. Buses were fairly cheap, simple, and easy to repair, and held a lot of people likely in need of a shower. The van and the Beetle became symbols of the hippie movement. The first-gen microbuses were a success for VW in the US, and certainly in the rest of the world, and 1968 would give us a newer version. VW redesigned the van for 1968 and made quite a few changes. The number of windows available went way down, and the windshield is now a one-piece unit. The vans were a little larger, and their styling earned nicknames like bread loaf or bay window. The Westphalia pop-up camper versions were also sold here. The engine got a little larger with the 1.6-liter air-cooled flat 4 now, and we have a 12-volt electrical system versus the previous 6-volt. By 1971, the buses got a newer dual-port intake 1600, which made a little more power. 72s gave us the Pancake 4 engines. They were still air-cooled, but no longer basically the same engines Beetles had. They were not so much about horsepower as they were about torque, and it was better suited for the larger microbuses than the previous Beetle motors. It was a 1.7-liter engine that was first used in the Type 4. The Type 4 was sold in the US from 1971 to 1974. It was VW's biggest car at the time. Anyway, now a bus has horsepower in the mid-60 range. 73s had an optional automatic transmission for the first time in a bus here. It too was borrowed from the Type 4. In 1974, the engine got larger again, and it's now a 67 horsepower 1.8-liter. 75s got fuel injection in the US, and by 76 it was a 2-liter version of this engine with 70 horsepower. 78s got electronic ignition, so no more points to change out, and 79 was the last year for these in the US. That isn't the end of these in other markets, though. In Brazil, it was called the Combi, and they rolled the last one off the assembly line in 2013. Quite a long run for a single model. A microbus in 1970 had an MSRP of $3,809 or $29,250 today. 79 buses MSRP started at $7,285 or $29,900 or so in 2023. The replacement for the Microbus was the larger Vanagon, which came out for 1980. The Microbus is an iconic design that just about everyone recognizes. It had plenty of pop culture appearances over the years. Bob Dylan's Freewheelin' album cover has a bus on it. Grateful Dead fans pretty much adopted the Microbus. A newer movie that prominently featured one is Little Miss Sunshine. The 1980s classic, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, had stone surfer dudes piling out of one late for class. And I can't forget about the Pixar movie Cars, where Tommy Chong voiced a classic Microbus. Microbuses are popular today with collectors. A pristine 23-window Samba can fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars today, and even buses with less windows can sell for some eye-opening prices. One huge fan today is the very funny comedian Gabriel Iglesias, better known as Fluffy. He has an impressive VW bus collection worth millions. VW has high hopes the bus nostalgia is still strong. The ID Buzz is coming. It is an all-electric van that obviously is a modern take on the Type 2. Prices are supposed to start around $40,000. Will this be the first minivan people will say is cool, just like the original VW minivan we got here was? Only time will tell. This has been my Type 2 chatter. I do hope you enjoyed it. Please give a like and subscribe to let me know. Until next time, chatter out.